Hey guys, our devotion today comes from Genesis chapter 2. A lot of stuff going on in this chapter. We see God wrapping up creation. He has that seventh day that he rests on. We see sort of a detailed explanation of his creation of Adam and of Eve, him putting them in the Garden of Eden. But before we get into that, let's remember to be in prayer for our church family. Today we are praying for Rose Mace. So we do see the beginning of the story of Adam and Eve. And they're put into the garden, and they're before each other, and they're naked, and they're not ashamed. That really is going to lead us into the chapter that Pastor Mike is going to cover tomorrow. I think for my part, though, for whatever reason, I was just struck by the beginning of this chapter. God's resting on that seventh day. His creating of the Sabbath day, setting it apart, making it holy. And we know that that's going to be something that is very important for him and his people, the Israelites, that he's going to choose later on. And so I've just spent time thinking about the Sabbath day and why it was so important and what it meant to God. I think about the Sabbath day, and I think about how Israel had such a difficult time obeying it. They were to take the last day of the week, the Saturday, and they were to rest, just like God rested. They weren't to work. They were to really just set apart that day to delight in the Lord, to think about Him, to honor Him, and to keep that day holy because He did in creation. And they also had a Sabbath year at the end of 6 years that they would let the land rest. I think about them struggling with that. One of the earliest things I think about is when they are in the wilderness and God is feeding them and He tells them, okay, I'm going to feed you with this bread from heaven for 6 days. And on the sixth day, I'm going to give you twice as much, but I want you to gather that up. And so on the seventh day, you won't have to do any gathering. You can observe this Sabbath day. It seems kind of strange, for them to be in the wilderness, and yet you would think, is this really important? We're in the middle of the wilderness. Do we really need to be observing the Sabbath day? Absolutely, it was important to God. Of course, some of them still struggled with it. They gathered enough for 2 days on Saturday or on Friday, and then on the Sabbath day, they still went out and tried to gather more. But, that was something that Israel constantly had trouble with, obeying God on the Sabbath. Why was the Sabbath day so important to the Lord? I think there's a few different reasons. One of the reasons that I think is because it showed who their God was. They were set apart to the God who created everything. It was a link back to the creation story, the one true God who made everything in 6 days, and then He rested on the seventh day. I think it was symbolic in that reason. But I also think that it was symbolic of God's salvation work and the work that He was doing in Israel and ultimately in all who come to faith in Jesus Christ. In Ezekiel, God talks about the Sabbath day in chapter 20, where He says, I gave them my Sabbath as a sign that I am the one who sanctifies them. For them to keep this, they would know I'm the one who sanctifies them. I'm the one who sets them apart. I'm the one who is making them holy. And it makes sense when you think about it. Think about how God worked in creation, and He worked for 6 days. But then there came a time when His work was complete, when there was rest. Well, God was doing the same sort of thing through Israel. He was working with them. He had set them apart, and that was the beginning of a journey. And He made these promises. He made these covenants to them. And ultimately, there would be a place where His work was done, where they entered in to His rest with Him. So the Sabbath day was not just a day for them to live in obedience to this random command of God. It was symbolic, not just of who He was as the one true God, but of what He was doing for them. He was sanctifying them. They trusted in Him for everything from what they needed to get through that day to their very existence, their righteousness, their eternity. We know that the ultimate fulfillment of that is Jesus Christ. The Sabbath day points towards Him. And when we trust in Him, we know that He's sanctifying us. One day we will enter in to that rest. I know that we don't all celebrate the Sabbath day the same way that they did, certainly not to the same extent they did, and we may observe it in our own way on a Sunday, on the day that Jesus was resurrected, on Saturday, on Friday, whatever the case may be. It's important that we know rest is important, but I think also just meditating on what the Sabbath day means and how it's symbolic of us trusting in God, not just as our provider, but as the ultimate provider of everything we need, the one who sanctifies us, the one who is making us holy, the one who one day we're going to be able to enter into His rest. I'm thankful for this passage today. If God spoke to you through the passage, something else, there was a lot of other stuff in this passage I didn't talk about. Leave us a message on Facebook. Minister to one another. Talk about what God revealed to you today through this passage. God bless you.